Hello, Betty Babes and Bows. Welcome to the second episode of the official Betty Page podcast. This is Tori Rodriguez with Betty Page Fitness, here with my co-host Mark Mori, the director of Betty Page Reveals All. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Tori, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good and always happy to talk about Betty Page.
Same here. I can't wait to get our Betty fix on again. So we'll start with a couple of quick announcements and then get into our topic of the day, which is related to Betty's mental illness and sort of how it's been handled by a particular person
Well, yeah,
in the
there's a lot
media.
of misinformation, and it goes beyond misinformation. It's almost a smearing of Betty, and we want to set the record straight.
Absolutely. We'll fight for our gal. So first, just want to remember and appreciate the legacy of Tempest Storm, who passed last month.
Yes, and Tempest is known to Betty fans from the film Teaserama, right? And
Yes.
and that great color film. There's you can see some clips of it in Betty Page Reveals All, and Betty really I think had second billing to Tempest, but because Tempest was bigger in that time around 1955, she was a big major burlesque star. But
Yeah.
in later years, Betty Page became much more widely popular, and in fact, I met Tempest Storm at Betty's funeral in 2008 in Los Angeles. I interviewed her. She was soft spoken, couldn't have been a nicer woman. And she also came to the premiere of Betty Page Reveals All in Las Vegas in 2012. And so we're just marking the passing of a real icon in the burlesque and pinup world.
Definitely. And she was just so fond of Betty. Like she wrote the foreword for the book that I wrote with Betty's nephew called Betty Page, The Lost Years, and just really talked highly of Betty. And it was just a
Yes,
super sweetheart.
and maybe just what she was, one of the things she was well known for back in the day was she had her breasts insured with Lloyd's of London for something like $1 million. Not, we don't know if that's a true
Wow.
story,
Yeah.
but at least her publicity agent put that out.
Well, it's a
Right,
good story either way.
right. And in the announcement for Teaserama, the announcer goes, "And Tempest Storm, who goes 3D, two better." so that was
and
always a funny line, I thought.
yeah, and then of course my favorite one that I've mentioned to you before is the Tempest in a D cup.
Right. Anyway, so we're fondly remembering
Yep.
Tempest Storm and her recent passing. She passed since our last podcast. So,
Yeah, yeah. So condolences to her family and friends, and we'll remember her fondly for sure.
yes. And so, what else we have on the agenda there, Tori?
So we're getting in. We'll get into the meaty topic of the day, which is relevant to Mental Health Awareness Month, which is every May. You and I both know, and a lot of Betty fans know, that Betty struggled with mental illness. She was diagnosed in her later years with paranoid schizophrenia and had a couple of notable incidents that have been well reported, including both in your documentary and in my book, The Lost Years. So it was pretty surprising to.
But before we do that, let's just talk
Mhm.
about what she actually did, just very quickly. Betty had actually had a conflict with a landlord in California, threatened with a knife, and I think actually attacked one landlord, for which she was convicted and served a few months in prison. Then
Mhm.
she had a second similar incident where she attacked a landlord with a knife, actually cut the landlord. And for that, she went away for 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. She was
I mean, she went away to a mental institution, pled not guilty by reason of insanity to attempted murder.
exactly, which is a very important point to the story that we're about to get into. And so it was just pretty surprising to me when because I managed Betty's official social media pages, and so it was really surprising to start seeing these weird comments all of a sudden, which I'll read a few of them in a little bit. But basically traced it back to this blogger who does this blog called Murder, Mystery, and Makeup. And her name is Bailey Sarian. And in this episode, she's first of all, just really just kind of nonchalantly talking about Betty's, struggles and um, really just sort of almost making light of the situation. But
Yeah, she's
so
very glib about it.
very, yeah. And so that was my first issue with it. And
Well, and let's just say one thing right up front. The name
Yep,
of her thing is Murder, Mystery, and Makeup. Well, in this case, in the case of Betty Page, there's no murder. There's
yep.
also no mystery. The facts are known. And my personal opinion, there's too much makeup involved in that.
Well, that's subjective, but it's certainly you're
Yes,
right.
that's subjective. You're right. I interjected in that subjectivity. Anyway,
Yeah,
go ahead.
but the objective part is definitely that there is no murder involved, and so that's what makes this situation particularly egregious. So basically, Bailey Sarian, throughout the thing, she's saying things like, I don't know, I feel like I'm making this up, but I think I read somewhere this and that, blah blah blah. But she basically says a couple of times that, or implies that he killed someone. And so in one of those statements in particular, like really at the end of the podcast, um, she's like, I could have sworn that I read an article in which Betty said she murdered someone.
Well, and then she also says she heard Betty say she killed someone, which never happened. That
Yeah,
Betty never said that. I mean, there's nobody that's researched more about Betty Page than you and I, Tori. And I've listened to every interview Betty ever did. I've read everything. This is so far from what Bailey is saying, is so far from reality that and it makes me question her mental state. So,
well,
I mean, yeah.
understandably, and it's really surprising because she has this huge audience, and it's I really have a hard time believing that you know she didn't know better, and it's
Well,
obvious.
at one point she says, "I might be making this up."
She says that
So
several times.
she's trying to she states these things like they're facts about Betty murdering somebody, and she's like trying to cover herself, but yet she's trying to do this sensationalist thing.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, and she's pretty clever about the way she does it. And at one point, she says something very close to like, no word on what happened to the landlady. And then she goes, I think I read somewhere that she might have died. And then she goes, hold on. And then she goes to a different like segment or whatever. So she's purposefully, it seems,
Well,
really
yes, she's playing fast and loose with the facts, or beyond fast and loose. And so we want to challenge Bailey to correct the record. Bailey
absolutely.
can come on our podcast and we can go through all the facts on this situation. And she
Yep.
certainly owes it to the Betty fans and to the people who she's misled. And she's really smeared Betty's reputation and name. And I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me if Betty were alive, she could potentially sue Bailey for libel.
Right.
So, and we want to correct the record in several ways. One is the facts of what happened with Betty. Two, to get a better understanding of who Betty was and her mental illness and why that doesn't diminish who she is as a person and why she's so wonderful and why we still like her, despite the fact that she had a mental illness and stabbed somebody. And
Absolutely.
and yeah, so that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and it would be one thing if it was just. I mean, it's bad enough that Bailey, herself presented the story this way, and tries to make it appear like Betty killed someone just so she can fit into her murder show, basically. But you know, what's worse is that now people are coming onto Betty's social media pages and saying, and it's not like people are flooding the pages with these comments, but they're pretty frequent now, and it's directly related to the Bailey Sarian podcast. So I'm going to read a few of these comments, and I do just want to give a content warning to anyone that with mental illness that might, be harmed by hearing negative things about people with mental illness. But so here are a few examples. So it's crazy to think this is when I posted probably like a bondage picture of Betty, and somebody commented, "It's crazy to think she did murder people and loved the BDSM scene." And then on Betty's birthday, the Betty's birthday post, somebody commented, "Celebrating the birthday of a murderer, SMH." a couple others. I love her, but she was a complete psychopath and murderer, stabbed someone to death while reciting the Bible. And finally, Bettie Page is a crazy Christian and murdered someone. So, I mean, Bailey Sarian did this. This is a direct result of that podcast
Right. There's
or that.
nobody else that we're aware of that has made these charges about Betty, really because they're completely untrue.
Yeah.
And so Bailey's got a responsibility to correct the record here. I hope she finds out about this, and I hope she does that and can try to limit or reverse some of the damage that she's done. And one of those comments you just read, they said something about Betty loved the BDSM scene. Well, no, Betty did not love the BDSM scene. She did it without judgment because she was paid to do it,
Yeah.
and
She was a working model.
it was the lack of judgment against BDSM and all the other things that was part of Betty's personality. And people kind of assume, or some people assume, she was into all of that stuff she did when she was posing, and she really wasn't.
Yeah. She's just doing her job, as she likes to say, and enjoying every minute of it.
Right.
Channel
Right.
little Betty there. But so you can see how it's not, so it's damage. So first of all, it's lies, obviously, and it's damaging to Betty's reputation. But it's also one of my biggest concerns too, is that people with mental illness and people who love people with mental illness are seeing these comments. They're seeing how Betty's mental illness is discussed and how it's sensationalized and how she's written off because she was mentally ill. And they internalize that. That affects people who are living today. It's not just Betty's reputation.
Right. So Bailey is potentially doing actual damage to people, and spreading the idea that people with mental illness are to be, I don't know what, treated in a way, that there's like a judgment about it that's a big problem in society anyway. And she's only perpetuating that.
Right, absolutely. And one of the important points I wanted to make, especially for mental health awareness, is that schizophrenia in particular is the most stigmatized mental disorder. And people that live with schizophrenia face just unimaginable hardship, and they don't need, on top of that, the stigma and the judgment and people fearing them and thinking that they're violent. And in fact, most people with schizophrenia are not any more violent than, like, say, the average person. Now, one thing that's interesting is people that get command hallucinations, like Betty did, voices telling her to do things. There is an elevated risk of violence in people with command hallucinations. However, they're highly treatable, and I think that's one of the points we've talked about before, is that Betty didn't have proper treatment. And so, it really, I think, calls for compassion and not minimizing the pain that was caused to the people involved in those incidents, but understanding, just trying to seek some understanding and have some compassion for what she went through as well.
And if you want to have an idea of Betty's mental state in the lighter part of her life, you can go and watch my movie where she is narrating. That's her voice. And that's after she got out of the mental institution. I did an extensive interview of several hours in 1996 and another one in 1999. And those recordings of Betty in the 1990s are the voice you hear in the film. And she doesn't sound like some crazy person, if you want to put it that way.
Right. Yeah, she was. It was nice to see that. It really did seem like she found some stability in her later years. I'm really happy to see that. But again, it seemed like she got into a proper treatment plan and had the support she needed. And back when she was struggling in the 70s and 80s, she didn't get the care that she needed. For example, one of those incidents with the landlords, she was living by herself in a trailer, and it's like, why was somebody with untreated schizophrenia living by herself in a trailer? It's like the worst possible
not only
scenario.
that, Tori, she had gone to California at the invitation of her brother, who was supposed to care for her, and her brother abandoned her. And that's part of the situation that led up to her real mental breakdown.
Which is not surprising because that is, in fact, stress is a trigger for psychosis in people who have psychotic disorders, stress and trauma. And she certainly had just pretty much nonstop traumas throughout her life, including a, a childhood abandonment, sexual trauma, domestic violence. I mean, the list goes on. But certainly lots of periods of super high stress in those later years preceding those times when she was
Right.
involved in those violent incidents.
And another thing wrong with the way Bailey Sarian put out this thing about Betty being a murderer was like that shows a complete misunderstanding of the mental illness and even
Mm-hmm.
the legal judgment that was made on Betty, not guilty by reason of insanity. But Bailey's talking about her as if she's guilty,
Right.
right? Even though she didn't even murder anybody. Oh, yes, well, Bailey says she murdered somebody. But no, she had, let's talk about that a minute, about how
Yeah.
you can have a mental illness and actually commit a violent act, but not be held responsible for that legally.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought that point up, because it's a whole different ball game, and that's why it's not that she was found guilty. It's a not guilty by reason of insanity, and the sentence is mental health treatment.
Right. And so when you're not guilty by reason of insanity, it means that your brain is not functioning in a way that you are responsible for your acts. What you
Right.
do becomes separated from there's a breakdown there mentally, and the law recognizes that that's not something you made a decision to do on your own.
You're not able to tell the difference between right and
Yeah.
wrong is what it boils down to. Yeah. And you're right. The way that Bailey Sarian has presented this is as if Betty just, fully logical, chose to stab her landlord. And that's
Yes, and
far from the truth.
and she cooks up or makes up some facts that I had never heard before. She says Betty sliced the face of her landlord, which is not true, stabbed her 4 times in the chest, which is not true, cut off her finger. None of that is true. Now, where she's getting all this stuff, I don't know. It seems like the way she's coming across, she's kind of making it up on the fly, just
Mm-hmm.
as for her sensationalized murder mystery and makeup podcast.
Yeah.
So it's just so irresponsible and so damaging in some of the ways we've been talking about.
I agree completely. And of course, that's the biggest point is just how damaging and harmful it is. And, but then, there's this other aspect of she even states like, she said, I could only find, she goes, I don't know why nobody's talking about this. I could only find like 2 articles about it. Well, I want to challenge everybody listening right now to just Google it and see what comes up.
Yeah.
Google, Betty Page mental illness. It's not, or Betty Page landlords or whatever you want, but it's not a secret. And
Right, and it's in my film. Betty Page
right.
reveals all. It's in the film. Betty talks about it. We go into it. We show the papers where she was charged. We go through the incident that happened, and so nobody's been covering up anything with Betty Page.
I agree, and it's frustrating and annoying to say the least when Bailey claims that nobody's talking about this, and then her fans are echoing those statements. They're coming onto the page acting like they have some big reveal, but they're like, hey, did y'all know? Why is nobody talking about this? Like it's a big cover up or something.
Right, and if people want to talk about this on our social media, on Facebook and Twitter and other the places we have our social media, we'd love to engage in that discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Um,
I do want to, just to reiterate the point about, schizophrenia and violence. And, this is from a study, it says most patients with schizophrenia will never be violent. For every schizophrenic patient who commits, and the preferred way to say that now is every person with schizophrenia, not schizophrenic patient, but for every person with schizophrenia who commits a homicide, 100 will die by suicide. Furthermore, schizophrenia increases the likelihood of being the victim of crime and exploitation. A better knowledge of violence and schizophrenia can improve the care that these patients should receive. So again, a plea for compassion and understanding instead of learning about mental illness from somebody unqualified like Bailey Sarian, like just, do some basic research through, NAMI.org, NAMI.org has lots of great information, support groups, helplines, etc. And it's pretty easy to find information and educate yourself.
Yeah, and this where I saw Bailey's thing was on YouTube, and you know, YouTube is supposedly censoring a lot of stuff that's not factually accurate. So,
But
and I'm
not in her
against
case.
censorship. Well, I'm
Yeah.
against censorship, but you know, this I shouldn't comment on her makeup, but she's putting on makeup during the whole thing while she's talking about Betty murdering this person and saying all these inaccuracies
Yeah.
and creating this perpetuating this idea about mental illness and
It does make it pretty
but
gross.
she puts on eye makeup for the whole time and I mean personal taste, yes, but by the end to me she looks like a raccoon. I know that's a personal comment,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not in the factual area, that's a preference, but you know
Some people
I
like
couldn't help
raccoon
it
eyes.
because she's so far off base with
I know it does.
Betty's.
It makes you want to like attack her personally, but like I'm like, okay, no, no. Gonna
Okay,
stay.
so I'll limit that any
No,
further
no.
personal attacks.
But you know what? You have it again. You have every right not to like raccoon eyes. Uh, um. So, but yeah. So basically, like you said, we really this is something that does call for Bailey to make amends, and we'd love for her to come on the show and talk through the factual details. And if she does that, whether she does that or not, I really think that she should publicly apologize to Betty's memory and to Betty's fans
Yes, she
and
needs to
family.
correct. Yes, she needs to correct the record, and we're happy to talk to you, Bailey, offline, not in public. If you just want to review the facts, so you can go correct the record. We're not doing this to attack you. We want the public representation of Betty Page to be accurate.
Right.
That's all we're talking about.
Yeah. Um, so like you said, she needs to set the record straight, correct the incorrect statements, educate herself about mental illness, including schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, and stop sensationalizing it. You know,
Right, and stop perpetuating the stigma about mental illness and people with mental illness.
absolutely. And when on a pettier note, stop biting Betty's style while trashing her name for your own gain.
Yes, well, Bailey said she had a Betty tattoo, and she apparently has some Betty hair at certain points. So,
Yeah.
yes,
Yep, I've got like a few different pictures of her in different Betty wigs with the Betty bangs, and interestingly, when she does this is now I'll stay on this super briefly, but when she does the Betty, when she's done like Betty looks, she just calls it the pinup look. She doesn't even give Betty credit. So there you go.
there's some consistency there somehow.
I agree. I'm starting to see. This is really insidious. I'm going to investigate more.
Well, anyway,
I'm just
hopefully
kidding.
Bailey will respond in some positive way. Whatever
Yeah.
she chooses to do to straighten out the record, we'd be happy about that. And Tori, if there's nothing else on that, I think you wanted to mention a couple of our big Betty fans, or
Yes,
on
absolutely.
social media.
Definitely. So the first one I want to mention is Evan Lowenthal, who is known well in the Betty fan community, and he has spearheaded an effort to it's through a change.org petition to get Betty a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which of course I'm sure we both agree that she fully deserves.
Yes, actually, I think he also was advocating Betty for president, which even posthumously might be better than some of the people we've had. So,
Agreed. And I think he was trying to get her. He's trying to get her on a postage stamp too. But yeah, and you can easily find those campaigns like Google, change.org, get Betty a star on the Walk of Fame and that sort of thing, and sign that petition and help make it happen. The other one I wanted to mention, and we'll probably mention a couple of notable fans and Betty babes and that sort of thing in each episode or so. But so today I wanted to mention Dizzy Miss Lizzie. I don't know if you have met her. For some reason, I feel like you have, but I don't know.
is she in Atlanta?
She's in. I think she was in. She's from California, and I think she lives somewhere else in the Southwest now.
Okay.
But she's a huge. I mean, she's one of my very, very favorite Betty babes, as we call it. She really kind of like nails the Betty spirit, but also kind of brings her own cool twist to things. And I just really appreciate her a lot. She's been very supportive of Betty Page Fitness and a lot of other Betty brands, and just carries Betty's legacy and respects it really well.
Well, that sounds great. And like you said, Tori, we want to acknowledge some of the Betty fans as we go along, and we'll be doing some interviews at some point here when we get this podcast really humming, and some well-known people and some people who are big in the Betty community.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit of a tease for some future episode.
Yeah, for sure. And then we, again, you can find us uh, on social media. I'm at Betty Page Fitness on Instagram and Facebook. And Mark, you're on Facebook.
Well, there's a Betty Page Reveals All page on Facebook. There's also a Betty Page movie page on Facebook, and maybe sometime I'll explain why there's two. There's also Betty Page Reveals All on Twitter. It actually was related to a potential Facebook censorship, but there's also Betty Page Reveals All on Twitter, and please leave your comments and maybe even suggestions for what you'd like to hear on the podcast in the future.
Absolutely. And I will, at some point, we'll have show notes in some centralized place. But for this particular episode, I want to post some links to some mental health resources and information and things like that on bettypagefitness.com. So by the time folks are listening to this, those will be up there.
Well, and Tori, I don't know, some people may not realize you are a mental health professional yourself.
Right. I forgot to mention that important detail.
I mean, I'm only an amateur, but you're a professional.
Yeah. I'm a psychotherapist, have been for, oh my gosh, a million years now. This will going into my 18th year.
Wow.
Since I was a toddler. Can you believe it? So I'll have some resources up for people who want to learn more.
Okay, sounds great, Tori. Well, until the next episode of the official Betty Page podcast, we're signing off for now, right, Tori?
We are. Thank you so much, Betty
Until
lovers.
next time. All righty.
See you soon. Bye.